good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome and thank you so much for being with us. Hello, hello, hello. I see lots of familiar faces and I see some new people as well. It's gorgeous to be here with you. And as we're in December 2023, I think that this topic is particularly pertinent right now, given the state of affairs all over the world. We are going to be talking about anger as an emotion or a feeling and the associated or very closely related feelings around anger. We're going to be talking very quickly about what it physically does to you. We'll focus in on the scientific research because, as you all know, I quite like a little bit of evidence to substantiate or support the claims that we're making. And naturally, I'm also going to really dive deep into the spiritual, the esoteric, because that's who I am. A blending of that which is a little out there and also a little in here. Something ethereal and also something quite anchored in reality, as the world quite likes published research. They seem to think that that matters more than our own intuition. So we're going to cover all of that. We're going to do it as quickly as possible. And given that you're all part of the community that is Positive Prime, naturally we'll be talking about Positive Prime as one of the solutions. For those of you who are already a certified coach, therapist, healer, and you've been through our professional program and you understand some of the foundations or the comprehensive base for what I'm going to say, I have a few little slides to try and create some structure. Some people like that. I'm not really a fan. I died by PowerPoint death in my corporate world, and I don't really value it. I think that what happens is people get distracted. So if that's you, how about I ask you to lean in a little, turn your ears on, create some listening space, take some nice big deep breaths, preferably in through your nose, hold for a few moments and breathe out ever so slowly. Try to make the exhalation longer than the inhalation. And try to push all the air deep down into your lungs so that you feel like your belly or your stomach area, the middle of your torso, is expanding. Again, a nice big, huge, deep breath in. Hold for a couple of moments and breathe out ever so slowly and lightly. Right at the end, try to push even more air out before you breathe back in. Okay, so I hope that you're all centered. I am very grateful that you're here. I would love to hear at the end your feedback about whether this has been useful or not. Alrighty, so let's dive into understanding anger and its effects. I'm going to go to a full screen mode for these slides. And we're going to whip through this because there's much more exciting stuff at the end for our Q&A. I sent an email out to our entire email database a little while ago saying that I'd read in a great textbook actually that is prescribed for the Masters of Applied Positive Psychology at the University of Pennsylvania, which is considered kind of the home of studying the very best and the very latest of positive psychology everywhere or anywhere in the world. So UPenn's MAP program is really what's considered as the most prestigious of positive psychology courses. Anyway, there's a textbook that they prescribe, and in that textbook it essentially says that smoking a packet of cigarettes is the equivalent of anger for 15 minutes a day. And that captured my attention, my whole attention, because I did anger. So Anthony Robbins talks about doing emotions. People do fear, they do anger, they do drama. We do emotions. They don't just literally come up out of nowhere. We absolutely do have conscious control over our emotions. But at the time I read this, I certainly was doing anger and I didn't know how not to do it. And some of what we're going to share is like the cursory kind of glancing overview. It's not meaty enough or substantial enough, in my opinion. It's not useful enough. It's not relevant enough. And so that's what we're going to focus most of this little conversation on. So let's go into what is anger. It's a natural human emotion. It's very natural. And we don't like to suppress natural emotions. Absolutely, we want them to come up. We do not want to suppress them. That actually is worse for us. We need to acknowledge and appreciate the emotions that show up for us. We want to be aware, but we actually also want to be grateful for what is it that they're trying to indicate, teach us, where's the lesson and why. Alrighty. But the fact is that we create a chemical cocktail in our body when we experience emotions, all emotions. And most of us experience certain emotions more than others. We're actually addicted to the chemical cocktail. It's actually like substance abuse. If you haven't seen What the Bleep Do We Know, it's a great movie. I would suggest that you go and have a look at it. But the fact is that when we experience anger, the chemical cocktail that's created in our body is not helpful. It's harmful, right? It's not helpful. It's harmful. Interestingly enough, it's about the flight or fright response. And I'm going to tell you something fascinating about our research that we did at the Brain-Computer Interface Lab at the University of Technology in Sydney last year through their School of Engineering that proved that positive prime actually does put your brain into a state of flow. And that's almost the opposite of anger, where there's synchronization or harmony between your alpha and theta waves, where you are actually in a perfect state for healing. And when you're healthy, that word H-E-A-L is really about heal thy, T-H-Y, that's healthy, yourself, heal thyself, right? So when we are healthy, we heal thyself. So do you know the most interesting thing for me is that I want to know, how do I manage anger if I know it's not good for me? Deep breathing, we started that. Progressive muscle relaxation is another example of a strategy that you can employ if you're conscious enough to be aware of the fact that you're experiencing anger and you've chosen to do something about it because you know that you'd actually prefer to be feeling something better. Who knows what progressive muscle relaxation is all about? Should we try it right now? For those of you who need a little reminder, or maybe actually you're sitting here and you're a bit frustrated already because you kind of want to get to the good stuff in this webinar, class, whatever you want to call it. So I want you to feel your shoulders. And now I want you to put them all the way up near your ears and squeeze. As if you're about to blow a gasket. You should go red like I just did. Hold it and then release and feel how good the release is. Muscle relaxation usually needs the antithesis or the opposite for us to actually realize just how tense we were. Take a nice big deep breath in because we actually just released a whole heap of other chemicals into your body when we did that. Toxicity, right? Toxicity is created when we actually do contraction of muscles. Most marathon runners know that when they're experiencing lactic acid in the delayed muscle soreness, the onset after exercise, that's because a whole heap of toxic chemicals were created in the aerobic exercise. And that's lactic acid is one of those acids. And acid in your body leads to inflammation, and it's altogether not very good for us. But it's the world that we live in. Yes, regular exercise does help us to cope. CBT has been scientifically proven. And for those of us who really want to take this seriously, anger management classes are probably something to seek out. The fascinating new research from the field of neuroscience links sleep more closely to all sorts of these more negative emotions that we could feel. So what's interesting, and I'm just going to stop sharing here for a second, is that in the field of positive psychology, which is being heavily influenced by the studies and the research that are happening in the field of neuroscience or brain science, what they've actually discovered is that we don't cleanse the toxicity, those acids that are created in the brain, and the brain consumes most of our energy throughout the day. We don't cleanse ourselves, or the cleansing process doesn't happen unless we are asleep. Most of you know that we have a circulatory system, the blood circulates, and we have another circulatory system, the lymph, and the lymph basically takes away all of our waste, right? The glymphatic system inside your brain is what takes away the waste from your brain's activities. The glymphatic system does not actually operate efficiently or effectively unless you are asleep. Glymphatic efficiency and effectiveness, that system has been scientifically proven as one of the strongest links to Alzheimer's and dementia. Neurodegenerative degeneration. What's fascinating is that they also know now that emotions like anger damage neurons. It's literally causing brain damage. One of the interesting things is that I've been diving pretty deeply into the neuroscience research around dementia and why they call it diabetes 3 and what sugar's relationship has to do with that and how we cleanse ourselves of the inflammatory markers that are associated with sugar consumption. Back to sharing the screen, because I think that it's really exciting that we have an understanding of why anger is bad for us. And as coaches, healers, therapists, leaders, managers, wives, husbands, mothers, fathers, friends, sisters, we can all play a role in helping people to understand why anger is bad for you. The fact is that the strongest or the most volume of research has actually been done around this particular chemical cocktail and its effects on arteries, and in particular, how it damages those artery walls, and why there's this statement that 15 minutes of anger is the equivalent of smoking a packet of cigarettes for the effects on cardiovascular health and the contribution that it has to cardiovascular disease, right? But that's because the most amount of research, hours and dollars have been devoted to studying the heart over and above every other organ or system inside our body. In fact, whilst I was lying in intensive care, just about to have a pacemaker implanted the next day because they thought I had a heart issue, they've since found out that it's absolutely a neurological issue associated with my vagus nerve and my autonomic nervous system. The reality is that the nurses who were trying to comfort me said, "Oh, you're so lucky you're in the cardiac ward." And I'm thinking, I'm really finding it hard to create a link to being lucky right now. But anyway, they're so lucky that there's a problem with your heart because the most amount of medical and scientific research about any systems or organs in the entire human body has been done about the heart. And so the interventions for dealing with heart issues are actually much more advanced than all other organs interventions. Fascinating perspective, don't you think? What's fascinating for me is positive prime, right? So let's just all come to grips with the fact that anger is basically bad for you, really bad for you. There's a lot of research you can actually access and read if you like. But what I find particularly interesting is that there has been so many studies on the language that we have been subjected to and how it predisposes us to experiencing more anger or not. Some of us are actually primed to be angry. Now that's an interesting concept. The reality is that the 1970s saw the most amount of research around the heart. And I think that what will happen in 5 or 10 years' time is that we will actually have a much clearer understanding of anger's effect on the brain. But anger is an interesting emotion because so much is linked to it. Who here, maybe you want to put into the chat, who here has felt frustration? 15 minutes of frustration, whether that's because your computer doesn't work or you don't have a password or you've lost it or the store or the grocery shop doesn't have the ingredient that you wanted or needed. Irritation. Do you think any of you have experienced resentment or disappointment in the last 24 hours? Do you think you've ruminated on why for at least a few minutes? That means the chemical cocktail associated with this emotion has been created inside your body, and it's you and your thoughts that have done this to yourself. And then you think, yikes, what do I do about it now? Well, that's me anyway. I'm not going to deny, because whatever we resist persists. I'm not going to deny that I feel angry. Oh my golly gosh, in the last couple of months, I felt more frustration, more irritation, more resentment, more disappointment, and more stress than I've ever felt in my entire life. I've actually also felt jealousy and fear and hurt and injustice and shame. I'm swimming in a soup of this emotion that is doing more damage to me than anything that I could be doing with my diet. And all of these health professionals that I know, they yap on about how we need to take care of the food that we put in our mouths because of the nutritional requirements that we have. And yet most of them do judgment against the people who don't have perfect diets that cause the people who don't have perfect diets to feel all of these things. Not the food that they're putting in their mouth or the drinks that they're consuming are doing the damage. It's the shame. Alrighty, so suffice to say, whether you're concerned about the Ukraine or the mortgage that you're actually having to face and interest rates rising, or you're losing a job, or someone's been unfaithful to you, there are 1,000 reasons why anger is the predominant emotion that the majority of the world experience. Do you want to hear something really, really, really frightful? There are estimations of how many of us as a percentage of the world's population are living in the doing of those variations of anger for the amount of time per day. Anybody hesitate or want to hazard a guess? Think about you in your own life. Think about the people you care about. And what's interesting is that people think that the opposite of anger is what? I must admit, the scientific research that actually says that calmness and tranquility is the opposite of anger surprised me. I didn't think that that would be the opposite of anger. What would you have thought that the opposite of anger would be? And by the way, they say that more than 90% of us spend more than 90% of our time in emotions that are associated with anger. And there's a direct correlation with cardiovascular disease, the increase in diabetes, neurodivergence being a significant issue that we all face. It's absolutely extraordinary. And the bizarre thing is that we're in control. Interestingly enough, maybe it's through joy and love we get to calmness and tranquility. Can you really experience tranquility deep within your soul if you aren't loved or in loving environments or relationships, and if you don't have a way to access joy? Interesting, isn't it? So let's talk about positive priming and anger. For those of you who don't know very much about positive priming, we've got an enormous amount of resources available to you in the positive prime community that actually tell you everything that you need to know about positive priming. But I'll tell you what's the most fascinating thing is that our research last year proved something even more fascinating. Should I share with you what it proved? It proved that unlike what we actually truly think, and I'm going to tell you what I think that people truly think, or certainly the research suggests, Most people blame our reptilian brain and the flight or fright survival instinct to explain most of the ways that we're behaving and most of the ways that we're reacting and we're responding because of what we're thinking and feeling. And so there's this predominance that it's okay to be in attack or defense. And yet, what our research showed in positive priming is we have a much greater survival instinct for connection than we do for isolation. I'm telling you something really, 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 really interesting that isn't commonly known. But those of you who are the therapists and healers and coaches and managers and parents, carers in our community who have been through our professional training, our desire to connect is stronger than our desire to freeze or to fight or to flight, to run away. Did you hear what I just said? Our desire for connection is much more reptilian. It's our natural first response. It's more instinctive to us than fight, fright, or freeze. However, the media has led the majority of the world to believe that it's normal because of our reptilian brain and our survival instinct that we fight, we run away, or we freeze, and that it's okay for the majority of us to experience anxiety. It's fascinating, don't you think? Because it's just not the truth. It's not a fact, and it's actually not being born out of the published research coming from the field of neuroscience. Not even our own research, because guess what? Eye tracking, skin conductance, heart rate variability, and ECG, these incredible physiological devices were used in our own research that showed that we paid more attention and we were more inclined, we were more drawn in when we saw images in positive prime sessions of connection. And it changes the way our body starts to produce a new chemical cocktail. They say that social isolation is one of the biggest problems in the aging community that the world will ever have to deal with. Loneliness and the effects of loneliness on our physical bodies and our disease states, right? So it's super important that we know and we promote the idea that, guess what? Being together and being in community is absolutely what we're inclined to lean into to address times of stress. And we're all experiencing times of stress, right? So I'm just going to really quickly go back to sharing the screen and then we'll open it up for some Q&A. What's interesting is that in positive prime sessions, part of the formula is a certain ratio of images of connection, pro-social behavior. And I'm going to tell you what's even more fascinating about the very essence of positive prime and why no other intervention actually does such an elegant and quick job as watching a positive prime session does in 3 minutes. So what's fascinating is that 15, 20 years ago, when I first read, that 15 minutes of anger was the equivalent to smoking a packet of cigarettes. And I'm thinking, what? I mean, like the amount of money that has been spent in the Western world to try and prove to everybody that you should never smoke a cigarette. And yet where it's okay to do keyboard warrior, being an asshole, being a mean and nasty human being, and you know where I'm going with this, right? But there aren't public health campaigns to tell us to be more kind and nicer and more gracious and more generous, right? It's fascinating. So the mother-infant embrace and couples embracing, friendships, friends embracing, the next time you watch a positive prime session, I want you to have a really close look at and try and count the number of images. That'll give you a clue to the ratio and the formula of people embracing. And why? Because we actually want to do something particular. So let me just get to the end here. And this is the prescription for positive prime sessions that you could consider watching if you want to create an interruption. You know, Tony Robbins talks a lot about pattern interruptions. Like if you actually just want to change the way you're feeling, just do something completely different. We'll dive into that a little more. Sometimes we're in the grips of some of these emotions, whether it's frustration or shame. It's very difficult to calm down, relax, and enjoy. But there is something about viewing a positive prime session that makes it work for you. And I'm going to tell you what it is in case you need the reminder. Another session you could watch is about patience. And another session you could watch is about surrendering and letting go. There's a whole heap more you can do to dive into this, but I think that this is one of the greatest subjects or issues that we should be addressing as people who care, whether we're professional, qualified healers, therapists, guides, coaches, managers, etc. Alrighty, so the thing that changed everything was my understanding of the fact that the retina in your eyes processes what you see and sends messages to your mirror neurons, and your mirror neurons then send messages to your endocrine system, and it's your endocrine system that creates your hormones, including your neurotransmitters. So if you want to change the chemical cocktail in your body super quickly and reliably, what would the solution be? Think about what you see. And so in a positive prime session, there is a ratio of Duchenne smiles. You don't have to be smiling. You can be angry as heck. But if I put a certain number of happy, smiling Duchenne featured photographs in front of you, you can't help it. You can't stop it. It's as natural as the fight, flight, or fright. It happens in fractions of milliseconds. The retina in your eyes is sending messages to your neurons. Your mirror neurons are sending messages to your endocrine system. And guess what? Your brain thinks you're happy. You don't even have to be happy. You don't have to be smiling. Your brain thinks you're smiling. Is that just not one of the most beautiful, magnificent, remarkable, fabulous, fantastic things to know? All you have to do is look at a Duchenne smile and you change the chemical cocktail in your body. It's that simple. Duchenne smiles of people embracing, and now we have the compound effect. And most people do not sit in office environments or in public transportation environments, or, and you name the other environments, where the majority of people are expressing a Duchenne smile at you. Right? That's why, as dumb or as simple or as easy as it seems, watching a positive prime session that's just 3 minutes, why would you find time for that? Because you must. How are you supposed to neutralize the toxicity and the acidity and the inflammation effects of the other emotions you're experiencing in a day? I know that most of us here are magical. I'm pretty magical, but I still experience all of those emotions. See, positive psychology, interestingly enough, was what alerted me to the fact that most of the scientific research in the fields of social sciences and psychology is a science, right? It focused all of its research and then all of its interventions on all of these disease states, that if you had a scale of -12 to +12, all of the psychology or psychologists' recommendations and suggestions and strategies and activities and so forth, and all of the diagnostic tools, it focused on figuring out whether humans had something wrong with them and where they were on the scale of 0 to -12. Are they at -11, -9, -7? And all of the interventions that have been clinically studied and proven and are suggested, they aim to get the client, the patient, from -7 to -5, and they call that a win. That's not back to zero. The entire field of positive psychology was like, how about we don't presuppose there's something wrong with humans? How about we actually come with this perspective that there's a lot right with humans? How about we don't think that all of us are trying to fly away, run away, fight, freeze? How about we actually assume that humans want to connect in meaningful and significant and powerful ways? And how about we assume that people want to go from 3 to 5 and call that a win? And so all of these remarkable efforts were made in a new science of positive psychology, which is about performance enhancement. It's about a life worth living, right? So here we are with positive prime as this tool that interrupts, provides a solution that takes only 3 minutes, and has been proven that when people view a positive prime session, they're leaning into, their attention is captured, their mirror neurons are processing connection. And Duchenne smiles. And so interestingly enough, they actually got people in these angry states and they gave them puzzles to solve, and they could not solve them. And the world's people, you and I, and the people we surround ourselves with, we're trying to create solutions in our lives from these states of frustration, irritation. It might be only mild, doesn't matter. It's below zero. Most of us try to come up with incredibly elegant ideas that we follow through on with lots of motivation to address the issues in our businesses or in our lives from a feeling of there's a problem, rather than getting ourselves into a flow state and operating from there. I think that the strategies or the plans that you create from a flow state would be remarkably different. Who agrees? Exciting, hey? Really exciting. So there's nothing wrong. It's natural for us to feel irritation, frustration, shame, jealousy, anger. And yet it doesn't do us any good. And while we allow the others that we spend time with, because we become like the people we spend time with, while we allow that, we're not part of the solution. So let's be a community that encourages everybody else, recommends to everybody else that they positively prime themselves, right? 3 minutes a day. Negate, or at least neutralize, if possible, some of the effects. Do it more times, got a better chance. Should we dive into questions and comments before we do the and da-na-na-na? Okay, let's do that. Who wants to unmute themselves? Know that this is being recorded and it's being shared with the greater community. So if you don't want to out yourself, you can put something in the chat if you like. But if you do want to out yourself, then please feel free to unmute yourself. Let's be respectful of everybody's time. It's all precious. And let's try to get to the point as quickly as we can. Anybody?
Hi, Kim. I have a question.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Well, I do anger. I have done anger a lot in this lifetime. And as you know, I recently had a heart attack. Hey. Well, I was taught that anger is actually a secondary emotion. What do you know about that? And can you share anything with us about that?
It's complex and it's confusing because people will make a claim that anger arises in a way to justify, right? It's actually not a secondary emotion. It's a pure emotion in and of and by itself. And the others that I shared are related, and they can be precursors or they can be followers, right? When something escalates and there's intensity, and it's usually about the risk reward, that's why I say it's so complex. It depends on how anger is then expressed. The fascinating thing is that they also say that some of us as I alluded to earlier, are primed for anger. We've been exposed to language that makes us literally pick up and hypersensitive to that which exacerbates. So we might go from low level irritation or frustration and like zoom into rage, way past anger, because we actually don't have self-regulation that has been almost like a habit that we've been trained into based upon the childhood that we had or the significant others that we had, right? Not necessarily just our parents or our family situation. It could have been our situation in our educational institutions. It could have been the situation inside our sporting institutions. We could go on and on and on. There's a lot of research being done in the field of domestic violence about why some humans are quicker to anger, but what they really say is that's just about training around emotional regulation. What's been modeled to them is something that's not helpful. What's beautiful for me is that what's now being proven is it doesn't take anywhere near as long and isn't anywhere near as hard to retrain somebody. So somebody thinking that that cycle is being perpetuated, like abusers abuse and then the abused abuse, there's actually a lot of evidence that's emerging that says that that cycle is actually much more easily broken than we can imagine. What keeps it is actually societies, and in particular the media's reporting around the falsehoods, or not the truths, that it's actually very easy to address. It's much easier than we thought. It's a little bit like, and I want to go back to this, people saying, I'm just sad or I'm just anxious and I can't get my way out of it. But literally, if they sit in front of a positive prime session and they're passively engaged, their mirror neurons are being impacted by the retina in their eyes, and it is happening, and they can't stop that from happening, and a chemical change is happening inside their bodies, right? So if you surround yourself with people who do anger, you must be conscious enough to choose an intervention that interrupts the pattern for yourself. And so watching a positive prime session is really important. Or indeed, making sure that you watch something on television that's a comedy, right? Stand-up comics, interestingly enough, they have all those laugh tracks because there is some suggestion that your ears are as powerful as your eyes, except it hasn't been proven. And even people who are vision impaired actually receive information through their eyes, even though their brains aren't seeing the way that we're seeing. But we don't hear the same thing. So laughter tracks do actually prime, but not anywhere near as effectively or as efficiently as what you see, right? Jordan, I love that you admit that. I did a lot of anger. I was surrounded by family members that did a lot of anger or rage. I certainly have read a lot about these adverse childhood experiences, ACEs. I think that a lot of people use them as excuses to justify their adult behavior rather than being responsible and accountable enough to actually change themselves. I don't buy into, I had an ACE and therefore I am as I am. That's just BS in my world. Not very comfortable for people to hear. In fact, when I say it to somebody in a provocative way and they're a client of mine, highly likely the reaction I get is anger. How dare you, right? They'll go off down that rabbit hole. Can we please just watch some positive prime? We just do not react in the same kinds of ways when we're positively primed. Feeling anger is okay. Allowing yourself to stew in it is not okay. And it's not mature and it's not adult. And most of us, someone said to me once, I don't cook because I grew up in a family where my mother was incapacitated and she cited the reason. And my father didn't really cook because he was the breadwinner. And so we got a lot of takeaway. But this woman is an accomplished executive who actually deals with the legal issues around HR. And I asked her, did you learn how to be an HR director? Oh, yes, and with a lot of pride. And I said, do you think you could learn how to cook? We use the stories so that we can feel okay about the decisions that we're making for ourselves in our own lives. There are people I come across who say, you know what, I've got this really bad money story. And you will continue to have a really bad money story if you're going to tell people you have a really bad money story, right? The interesting thing is that in Jack Canfield's The Success Principles, the beginning of his book starts with taking responsibility. And the hardest thing for all of us is to hear what we don't want to hear, to know what we don't want to know, and to accept what makes us feel most uncomfortable. And that's where the stretch is. And then most of us in the change curve, I don't know if you know this, but in the study of change management, particularly in mergers and acquisitions in the corporate world, which is where I kind of started my career some decades ago, people do go through shock and disbelief. It's the same cycle or similar to the grief cycle, but everyone goes through anger. This shouldn't have happened to me. This is not the way I thought life was going to work out. I didn't sign up for this. My parents brought me into this world and it was a shitty experience and they should fix it. And whatever is the variation on all of that, right? All of us go through anger. None of us are immune. Yes.
Yes, well, I too grew up in a dysfunctional family, extremely, lots of anger. And I can remember clearly when you said that a day, most people saying to me, Catherine, why are you so angry? And I used to say, I'm not angry, I'm hurt. But in reality, the way I perceived things was truly the anger, but I just kind of just I was sad, I was crying. So that wasn't anger to me, you know. And along the way, and when I started chiropractic school, it was brought to my attention a school of thought called concept therapy based in Texas, San Antonio, Texas. And, you know, oftentimes when we're going through experiences, we're doing a knee-jerk reaction based on our old experiences, the story that keep replaying in our head. But they broke up the word responsibility into response ability. How we respond is a choice. It's always a choice. And if we just take just a few moments to stop, then we'll be able to respond to someone instead of making that reaction. So
it's a beautiful concept. Interestingly enough, have you also noticed the people who need should is not a very nice word, because I've actually read that that's like shitting all over yourself if you should all over yourself. There's a nice little close slip of the tongue there. But have you noticed that the people who need this information the most are the people who won't show up? Right. So word of warning for everyone, find somebody who's really angry in your life, try to have the conversation with them and be very careful about the boundaries that you have. That's a whole nother class, right? The boundaries. Want to help somebody, as I might like to do, literally just mirror a positive prime session on a smart TV in the main living room and expose people. Exposure therapy is an interesting concept to a positive prime without them even knowing that they're consuming a positive prime. Manipulative, yes. Intention, pure. Our bodies, they actually break down certain proteins more quickly or more slowly. Not very many people know this, actually. If you want to exercise and you want to, let's just say you want to address the fat in your body versus the muscle composition in your body. If you run from your front door, you don't give your body long enough to break down fat molecules as an energy source. Your body actually literally then goes straight to the sugars and the proteins that are in your muscles, and you break down muscle mass. And so most people don't understand, if they're doing aerobics classes, and this was very much an 80s thing, and they wanted to lose fat, they improve their cardiovascular health in some way, shape, or form. But what they actually did in aerobic exercise was that they created more toxicity and inflammation in their body. And what actually happens is the body hangs on to the fat to actually protect ourselves from the inflammation. So slow, long walks allow your body the time to break down fat as an energy source rather than going to glycogen in your muscles, right? The interesting thing is that some pathways to certain emotions are easier for some of us and are faster for some of us. Those people for whom the environment that they exist in, where there's a lot of mirth and there's a lot of laughter and there's a lot of jovial joyfulness, will actually have a much more concrete pathway, if I can use that analogy, rather than imagine a big jungle, you know, on the equator, and you need a machete to even get through like the first 1 meter because it's so dense, right? So it's some pathways inside our brain are like we're in these dense jungles, and some are these beautifully carved out Grand Canyons. So it's not necessarily the truth that we can all switch and change our emotions as rapidly as the person next to us.
Hi.
Training. Hi.
Hi, it's so good to see you. I missed you so much. So
Oh,
sorry
thank
that you don't do the coaching anymore.
Oh, we might be bringing it back.
Yay, I would love to. What I want to say about the anger. So I've done a lot of fear, a lot of anger in my life, and also come from very dysfunctional background. I have done the last 30 plus years, a lot of meditation. For me, and it goes with what you just say, it takes longer. I have learned that by longer meditation, there's something in my chemical system that changes the anger and that calms it down. So I do the positive prime, you know, or the happiness effect, or whatever, the Bruce Lipton, you know, being in this constant honeymoon effect or whatever. There's that, but there's also that stuff that needs more time to process. And to my surprise, my happy surprise, is that these days I hardly ever respond to other people's anger anymore. And that's because of all of this. You know, it's a combination of the things. But it's also the meditation, particularly after, you know, half an hour, 40 minutes of meditating. Something changes in my physiology that really, calms everything down. And
Thank you, Alice. You know, I love that interjection, because a lot of people who don't meditate claim that they don't have time to meditate. And Jordan, because you outed yourself about having a heart attack and that you've done a lot of anger, tell me, how long did it take for you to recover from your open heart surgery for your bypass?
Actually, they say I am still in recovery because once they cut open your sternum, it takes a very long time for that to heal. But to feel good again, it took months, probably about 6 months, before I felt like I was getting stronger again. Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you for offering that insight. A lot of people, and you know that there was this famous quote from, it was attributed to Steve Jobs. It's been also attributed to Mahatma Gandhi and various others, that we literally spend our lives making a fortune, and then we spend a fortune claiming back our lives when we actually address some kind of health crisis. And a lot of people can't find time and won't find time to look after their health until there's a crisis. And then they find that the amount of time that they spend in looking after their health means that most people wish, and let's hope that they don't regret, but most people wish that they had spent a lot more time looking after their health, their mental health, their emotional health, their physical health, their spiritual health, their social health. A lot of people don't have time to be social until they have to be, right? So we're pretty much a healthy bunch because we're here, but we're rare, right? But we are the light workers. We are the people who are the role models. We're the good examples. We're the people who can help. Maybe we're the people who are devoted to helping. I'll tell you some of the strongest motivations for changing my own behavior I've ever experienced was actually around the work of Stephen G. Post. So when Professor Post first showed me more than 15 years ago, the research around volunteering and its causal effect on heart health, because we had this fascinating conversation. He was speaking at a conference. The conference was actually called Happiness and Its Causes. And he was speaking at this conference, and His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, had spoken at the conference. Richard Davidson, I don't know if you know of him, an amazing academic. Some other incredible people like Jill Bolte Taylor. If you've never seen her TED talk about her experience as a brain surgeon and a woman who actually experienced a stroke, and she knew what she was experiencing based upon her profession and her education and so forth. Anyway, Stephen and I talked about this particular book that I had written that I'd become a best-selling author for. And it was about gratitude. And one of the things that I discovered was that the way for me to address my own frustrations, irritations, jealousies, shames, you name it, these associated feelings to this anger that had been very clearly role modeled to me as a child, was through gratitude. And he said, do you know, Kim, it's been medically proven that when you experience gratitude, your body increases its oxygen absorption out of your bloodstream, which, by the way, if you're having heart issues, is a very important fact. I used to tell this story in a keynote I did. I coincidentally popped into my parents' house the moment my father was having a heart attack. I had become a Reiki master. I did a lot of Reiki healing in my role as a therapist, a physical manual massage therapist, using thermotherapy and cryotherapy in the spa industry with my treatment, lithos therapy. And interestingly enough, I just happened to drop by my parents' place, and I saw the look on my mother's face the minute I entered the house, and I said, what's wrong? And she said, I don't know, your father's not well. And I rushed to their master bedroom, and my father was having a heart attack. And I lay my hands on him and I did a Reiki meditation, but it was really just a meditation guiding him through experiencing gratitude. And it was about helping him to focus very intensively on what he was most grateful for. Because at that moment, so long as his body and all the systems was experiencing the absorption of the oxygen that was available, he was more likely to survive and the outcomes were likely to be better. Well, I wouldn't have known about that body of research had Stephen not made this passing comment to me. And so I went off to find the scientific research that had actually been done about the emotion of gratitude. And emotion of gratitude is very closely related to love. People say love is at the highest, but the research actually says that gratitude is, in terms of the chemical cocktail and the pathway and the speed. So what's fascinating to me is that in being the kind of person that doesn't want the negative impacts or effects of anger, I became the person who tried to focus most on what I was most grateful for and try and do this intervention where I created for myself this thing that I watched that was a positive prime session in the making with lots of images of Duchenne smiles, knowing that so long as my eyes processed the information, the data of a Duchenne smile, my brain thought I was happy. It sent messages to my endocrine system and I started to produce more serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin. What's oxytocin? The connection hormone. What is one of the antidotes to anger? Connection. It's so simple. I wish they taught this in school, right? My ideal life is contributing as much as I possibly can to as many people as a philanthropist and doing as much as I possibly can as an investor. So part of the identity that I've chosen for myself from now here on out is I am an investor and I'm a philanthropist. In fact, I'm wearing a red dress today because I'm just about to pop off to a genuine charity that I help that's local. And they asked me to wear red because it's Christmas and we're Santa's helpers. 500 families who are homeless because of their domestic violence situation get to come through a community hall, and they effectively go through what we've created, which is like a giant department store, and they get to choose all sorts of items that you would normally buy in a grocery store, or you would normally buy in a gift store. And so children who couldn't possibly be in environments where they might get a Christmas pudding or they might get a toy, they get to actually come and choose. And there's 500 families that are looked after. Anyway, we do a lot of fundraising throughout the year. And the thing that I was leading to with Professor Stephen G. Post is that not only did he teach me about the value of gratitude, he taught me about the value of volunteering. And there's scientific research that has been substantiated and has been repeated that says that one of the best prescriptions the medical profession can provide to somebody who experiences anger is to actually get involved in community service that is pure volunteering, where there is zero expectation of being paid in any way, shape, or form in return for your contribution of time and energy. It's actually about time. It's about physically working hard. And so yesterday there was more than 50 of us, and these big trucks arrived with all of these potatoes, as an example, or apples. There were thousands of them. And so we had lines of all of us literally picking up 5 apples, putting them into a bag and sealing them. And so these 500 families could get a bag of apples and a bag of potatoes and a bag of zucchinis, or I think you call them aubergines, if you're elsewhere in the world. So anyway, they also got, it's amazing. But one of the things that has really gotten me out of myself, and it was so social yesterday, was laughing and carrying on. Everybody was in this really great mood, even though it was physically demanding. It was hard work. And so the science actually says, if the volunteering requires of you a physical demand and requires of you a sacrifice of time, the actual effects in your body are healthier. Amazing, don't you think? So yes, I could be a philanthropist and just give my money. And in some cases I have done. Yes, I could go to a social function, a high tea, a fashion show. I could be entertained. I could contribute to fundraising in those kinds of situations. But where I'm physically applying my own hard work to helping somebody else, the effects are even better. The distraction from my own life and the putting into perspective, and I am so grateful that I did not grow up in an environment where there was domestic violence. And so my dropping into gratitude yesterday was even more profound. I'm so grateful that my grandparents' role modeled to my father, being a really decent man to my mother. How lucky am I? How fortunate am I? How blessed am I that I was born into that family? That was not something I chose. That was pure luck. And so it was weird because yesterday here I am volunteering, but my experience of gratitude is actually what's doing the healing inside my body. And that's great for my nervous system, right? It's just so delightful when we devote ourselves to being the change that we wish to see in our own lives. And so I encourage all of you to spend a little bit of time thinking about what could you do to volunteer your time and your physical effort, right? And I encourage all of you to watch some more Positive Prime sessions. And one last thing, I'm about to start in 2024 a program that we're going to lead into. And what I have discovered is that what most people are most angry about right now is their finances. And most people do not have a vehicle. They don't have a program. They don't have a system to actually deal with it. Most people are really allergic to or anti-network marketing, direct sales, and yet there are solutions, entrepreneurial solutions, side hustles. And so I'm actually going to focus helping people in 2024 to actually deal with the financial frustrations in their lives. Having dealt with a financial frustration in my own life made the biggest contribution to my shifts. And so I'm not angry. I'm not jealous. I have my own buoyancy around abundance and prosperity and so forth. And I think that it's one of the things that I can be committed to. One of the things I was most angry for a decade or more was my debt, whether that was credit card debt or it was personal consumption debt or it was mortgage or it was whatever. I was debt and I just couldn't jump over it. And I was angry at myself, really angry at myself. And so I kind of want to be this advocate for people because I know what it's like now to be 100% debt free, to have paid off a mortgage, to have no mortgage. So there's no stress around that. There's no anger around the government's policies because it doesn't actually impact me. I mean, I can be angry at the injustices of people struggling because banks are doing record profits and people are really struggling paying their mortgages, and then some people are going to have their homes repossessed. We've got a really serious situation here in Australia. I can get angry about that, or actually I can just be a force for good and help people to get themselves debt free. Doesn't happen overnight, happens with some effort. I've been through that effort, but I didn't shirk my responsibility to myself to give myself this opportunity to live a life where I'm totally debt free. And that, I can't tell you what that's done to my emotional well-being. So for those of you, forewarning, there's going to be lots of that kind of work for the Positive Prime community, me really contributing. And so someone said, look, I've missed you. I think it was Alice. I'd love for you to do your healing. I'm actually going to do a lot of healing around financial frustrations, or a lot of healing around people's money stories. I'm actually going to do a lot of healing around the problems that people have because they don't have enough money. And it's a serious issue. And a lot of people are too scared of actually addressing it. And fear, as we just heard, is really closely related to anger. Right, so on that note, positive prime yourself, stay safe, be loving, mostly to yourself. Don't worry about loving others until you've really mastered loving yourself. You'll ooze love when you are really, truly in love with yourself. And maybe if you can't love yourself, just know that you are loved by the universe, by the angels, by God, by Mother Mary, whomever or whatever the entity or essences or energies are that you can actually really relate to. You are more deeply loved than you could possibly imagine. Love you. Ciao.